My original recollections were going to, or being taken on my dad's pedal bike to the South Mole to fish for white bream, sargo. That was his favorite fish, and it became my favorite too. It was the days when the Navy had many large ships, and there was always a large old ship in the harbour, large cruisers, large aircraft carriers, battleships, and of course the ships in those days weren't technically built like nowadays. Everything is run with computers. They were all manned by sailors, and they needed a large cruise. A cruiser might have well over 1,500 to 2,000 men aboard. They used to make a lot of food for them several times a day, and all the excess food went into the sea. There were chutes in the South Mole where everything was dumped into the sea. So you can imagine the amount of fish that was there when ships were there dumping food continuously. Unfortunately, nowadays the younger generations seem to prefer to cast out. They've got a chance of catching nicer, probably larger fish, but float fishing is not continued. Maybe one or two, but unfortunately it is not popular. It is not popular. Daddy would teach me where, you have to cast we fished with floats, of course. Depending on the depth, because of the current, the tides, you used to be careful to make sure that the bait went down to the bottom. We used to fish amongst the rocks. There was no use casting out. The sargos stay amongst the rocks, and that's where you have to catch them. Used to fish with, not with the rods that you have nowadays. It was a sort of a bamboo rod. They weren't bamboo because these were very light. But I remember it was black, and it was cane. And he used to make his own rings and tie them on himself. And it was very light, but it was very good, very strong.
Yo voy tirando esto de mientras para que vaya trayendo un poco el tema, ¿vale?
Cristian, coge de mi anguao hoy si quieres.
Espérate, vamos a gastar este que es el chungo y ahora echamos del bueno.
What we call anguao or ground bait. I used to make it at home the night before. The leftovers from food or something from the house. My sons used to save the stale bread for me, for the anguao. I also used to buy dog food, large tins of dog food, which was cheap, to mix with the bread and so on, to give it a bit of different in the anguao. Anything that had any nutritional value to attract the fish to the spot where I was fishing. The industrial one, I've used it. Rather very messy, I would only open the bucket once we were at the South Mole and then add it to the bucket that I had prepared at home. But the industrial one tends to smell a lot and attract a lot of small fish which you don't really want attacking your bait, I think.
Mi queso lleva unos 8 meses metido en la nevera.
Pero eso es bueno.
Sí, pero que no tengo trapo ni nada, no me voy a poner las manos, ¿te vas? cortamos un poco del tuyo, si gastamos el tuyo, pues uso el mío.
Corta de aquí este mismo.
Toma, coge.
Corta este, mira.
Coge de
pasa
aquí.
nada. No, corta lo tuyo, yo no corto mi queso sin. Córtame 2 rodajas, yo corto mi queso muy diferente a ti.
Ya, pero...
No pasa nada.
Más fácil.
¿Lo ves? Yo lo corto como lo corta Cristian. El queso.
I used to fish with bread paste, made with bread and cheese. We didn't use cheese, like Edam cheese like we use nowadays for the sargos. It was only done with bread paste. But I started making paste at home, and I would try one hook with paste and one hook with cheese. And more often than not, I used to catch a sargo on the paste, and the cheese was still there on the other hook. So you know, I started just using paste and not the cheese. It's cheaper too. It's cheaper too.
Yo estoy listo ya.
Yo ya mismo. No me atreva, Dylan, que fatiga, ¿no?
Tela. Yo I'd rather go down así con esto. Y ahora ya voy buscando más. Y yo, tanto pescado como dice no hay, ¿eh?
Más corto, Dylan, hay que pescar.
¿Eh?
Más corto.
¿Por qué?
Estamos muy largos.
We fished very close to the rocks. The ground bait, the wow, used to go very on the rocks if necessary, and the sea would wash it into that one. And the sargos used to wait under the rocks for the bait to reach them. It had to be rough. It had to be rough, like it's been these days, where amongst the rocks it's frothy white, which stops the sargo seeing your line, and you see he doesn't think twice about grabbing a piece of bait that's come their way. When it's calm, you can forget about it. North wind also. With the north wind, Daddy used to say that it wasn't worth getting up in the morning. And of course, not too sunny, a dark day like this, and rough, and that brought the nice, good conditions for float fishing for sargo.
We're fishing for white breams with the Levante, and basically what we use is small little floats to detect the slightest of bites, and when obviously the bream is hooked, then followed by a little bite-size weight, and then obviously the trace. The good thing is that the weight does basically that pushes your trace, your hooks down with the cheese. The floats plays the biggest part basically, due to if obviously you control the depth, you control with your float the depth that the white breams are feeding on, and obviously what you don't want is your hooks being tangled at the bottom of the rocks, leaving obviously your hooks hooked onto the bottom seabed, which obviously will make you lose and hook all your hooks. Basically what you do is, depending on the depth, it's just a matter of opening, and obviously you can slide it up and down, and when it gets to your, obviously, not the preferred depth, but obviously the depth you're supposed to be fishing at, depending on the actual fishing spot that you're gonna fish. And this has been a method that many anglers have used, I mean, from years and years to come to obviously now. And it's very good and very fun actually to fish, because when the float dives in the water, you know that you've hooked, which is obviously gives you a thrill, you know.
In Spain, I understand that when in my dad's day, if a man was very bright, very clever, he was called a sargo, because they're so bright. Nowadays, maybe with the lines being stronger and the hooks, we use smaller hooks and so on. It's easier to trick them into biting, but they can see your line very easily, very easily. We used to have a little bit of ground bait going in before we put our bait in, and that would sink because of the weight of the bread paste, and the weight on the line used to take it down to the correct depth.
Here we are. We just got to a very good spot when it's Levante, and we have the waves crashing against the rocks. This is crushed sardines to attract the fish, and obviously I'm just putting some in. You throw some in and
Ahí tengo uno.
and fantastic. Here we go.
El primer sargo, Treva. Buen sargo, pilla.
Ya os dije que era un easy going.